My prince, please, don't do this to me. I can't bear it. Hey, before I start, where are you watching from? If you're enjoying this story so far, leave a comment letting me know you love it and where you're watching from. I'd love to hear from you. The days following Prince Namdi's conversation with his father were tense. The palace felt heavy, with servants whispering and guards exchanging uncertain glances. Namdi, oblivious to the unrest, was consumed by arrogance, seeing himself as the kingdom's invincible future ruler. In his chambers, he reclined lazily while a servant arranged his clothes. He bragged to the servant about the women eager to serve him, claiming they feared him, not respected him. The servant nervously agreed, but Namdi's thoughts lingered on his father's warning. Despite doubt creeping in, he brushed it off. Outside the palace, whispers spread through the village. Women once enamored with the prince now spoke of his cruelty, and many began to fear him. Amara, a village girl taken by the prince, walked with a heavy heart. Determined not to be broken, she vowed to fight back against the prince's control. Later, King Chijok, troubled by his son's actions, received word that the villagers were turning against the prince. The women were scared, and some refused to come to the palace anymore. The king knew he had to act before it was too late to save the kingdom. Meanwhile, Namdi, still confident in his power, rested in his chamber. He had heard the whispers of fear, but they only made him feel more powerful. Yet deep down, doubt began to grow. The morning sun cast a harsh light over the village as Prince Namdi rode through the dirt paths, flanked by his royal guards. The air was thick with the sounds of villagers going about their daily tasks. Some were tending to their crops, others to their animals, and a few were already gathering water from the river. It was a quiet morning, but the prince was not in a peaceful mood. His mind was consumed with thoughts of control, power, and the thrill of taking what he desired. As he moved further from the village and deeper into the forest, he saw her. A girl, a young orphan, standing alone by the edge of a small stream. She was bending over, gathering water in a small clay pot. Her long hair fell around her shoulders, and the simple dress she wore barely covered her slender frame. She was beautiful, too beautiful for someone so poor, too beautiful for someone who had nothing. Her face was soft, innocent, untouched by the harshness of life. She wasn't a palace maid, nor a noble woman. She was just a poor girl, a village orphan with no family and no one to protect her. Prince Namdi's eyes locked onto her, and a dark grin spread across his face. He had never seen a girl so beautiful, and in that moment his desire for her grew stronger. He didn't care who she was or where she came from. He wanted her, and in his mind, no one, not even her, could say no to him. He spurred his horse forward, moving swiftly toward her. The girl, startled by the sound of hooves, stood up straight, dropping the clay pot. Her eyes met his, wide with fear, as she realized who was approaching. Well, what do we have here? A pretty little thing out in the middle of nowhere. All alone too. What's your name? The girl, trembling, lowered her eyes and took a step back. She knew the prince, of course everyone did, but she had never been so close to him. Fear surged through her body as she tried to find the words. My name is Ifeoma, your highness. Prince Namdi chuckled darkly, dismounting from his horse and stepping toward her, his gaze intense. You are very beautiful, Ifeoma, but beauty can be dangerous in a world like this. Do you know who I am? Ifeoma nodded quickly, her hands clasped tightly together, the fear in her eyes growing. You are Prince Namdi, your highness, the future king. The prince stepped closer to her, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. His smirk deepened as he noticed how small and fragile she appeared, like a delicate flower in the wild. She was an orphan with no family to protect her, and that only made her more vulnerable to him. And that's exactly why you're so lucky to be in my presence, Ifeoma. You should feel honored. Ifeoma stepped back instinctively, her heart racing as she realized the danger she was in. She had heard the whispers of the prince's cruelty, the way he took whatever he wanted without mercy, but she had never imagined that she would become one of his victims. Before she could react, Prince Namdab grabbed her wrist tightly, pulling her towards him with an iron grip. She struggled against him, but his strength was too much. Stop fighting, Ifeoma. You're going to enjoy this. Tears welled up in Ifeoma's eyes as she realized there was no escape. She had nowhere to run, no one to protect her. The prince had everything: power, wealth, and control, and now he was taking everything from her. With one swift movement, Namdi dragged her away from the stream and into the dense bushes nearby, where the trees blocked out the light, leaving only the suffocating silence of the forest around them. The air was thick, and Ifeoma's heart hammered in her chest as she struggled beneath the prince's hold. "You'll be mine tonight. You won't resist me. No one does." Ifeoma's body shook with fear, but her mind screamed for a way out. She could feel his hands on her, his grip tightening as she struggled to free herself, but it was futile. He was too strong. Then, something happened. As Namdi moved to force her further into the bushes, Ifeoma collapsed to the ground. The shock of what was happening, the terror, the helplessness, it was too much for her. Her breath grew shallow, her chest tight with a pain she had never known. The weight of the prince's cruelty broke her, and as she gasped for air, she felt her strength leave her. Her vision blurred, and the world around her seemed to fade. Namdi, realizing something was wrong, paused for a moment, but his arrogance prevented him from truly understanding the severity of the situation. He knelt beside her, a smirk still on his face, believing she was just scared. "You'll be fine, Ifeoma. You'll get used to it." But Ifeoma never responded. Her body was limp, her breathing slow and shallow. The shock had taken its toll, and the life in her seemed to drain away. Prince Namdi stared down at her, his grin faltering as he realized something was terribly wrong. Panic flickered in his eyes, but only for a moment. He had taken what he wanted. He had controlled her, and now he didn't want to deal with the consequences. He stood up quickly, looking around for his guards. The night had grown eerily quiet, and the distant rustling of the trees seemed to mock him. "Take her away. Bury her somewhere here. No one needs to know. It's just another girl who couldn't handle me." His guards, ever loyal, approached silently, taking the lifeless body of Ifeoma and carrying her away into the darkness. The prince stood still for a moment, staring into the forest, a mixture of unease and arrogance in his eyes. He had taken what he wanted, and now he was free to move on. But deep inside, a seed of doubt began to grow. What had he done? The nights following that fateful evening in the forest were plagued by restlessness for Prince Namdi. The haunting presence of Ifeoma's spirit lingered in his mind, a shadow that refused to leave him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her eyes, filled with rage and sorrow. It wasn't just the fear that consumed him, it was the guilt, the heavy weight of what he had done. But no matter how much he tried to push the thoughts away, the torment only grew worse. The prince could no longer escape the sound of her voice in his ears, a constant whisper in the back of his mind. It followed him wherever he went, even into the most private corners of the palace. His nights had become sleepless, filled with nightmarish visions of Ifeoma, her spirit ever present, her anger growing stronger with each passing day. Namdi lay awake in his bed, the cool sheets twisted around him, his body drenched in sweat. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, and his heart pounded in his ears. He could still hear the whispering, faint at first but growing louder, closer, her voice soft but filled with fury. "Why did you take me? Why did you ruin my life?" The prince's eyes shot open, panic seizing him. His room was dark, and the only light came from the moon filtering through the windows. He sat up in bed, the room cold despite the warmth of the night. He looked around frantically, but there was no one there. The whispering had stopped, but his fear hadn't. The spirit was near.
"It's just in my head, just in my head."
But he knew it wasn't. The more he tried to deny it, the more powerful the presence became. The air grew thick and heavy, as if it was pressing in on him from all sides. Suddenly, the whispers returned, louder this time, filling the room with an overwhelming presence. "You took everything from me, my life, my hope, and now I will make you pay." Namdi's heart thudded painfully in his chest as the temperature in the room dropped, and his breath became visible in the air. He could feel the cold touch of her spirit on his skin, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. He stumbled out of bed, his body shaking, his mind racing with terror. He could hear the rustling of her presence, the sound of footsteps echoing around him, though there was no one there. The shadows in the corners of the room began to shift, as if they were alive. He backed away, his heart pounding, but every step he took, it felt like the darkness was closing in around him.
"Leave me alone, please. I've done nothing wrong."
But the whispers only grew louder, more insistent, filling the room with an unbearable sorrow. His knees buckled, and he fell to the floor, hands pressed to his temples as he tried to shut it all out. But there was no escape. The guilt was eating him alive, and the spirit was only a reminder of the evil he had done. You took my life, and now you will suffer. You cannot escape me, named Namdi. I will haunt you until your last breath. The prince's body trembled with fear as a cold breeze swept through the room, despite the windows being shut tight. He could hear Ifeoma's voice clearly now, as if she were standing beside him, her words slicing through the air.
Stop, stop, I beg you please, I'm sorry.
But the spirit did not relent. Her anger only intensified, wrapping itself around him like a suffocating cloud. Namdi felt his chest tighten, his breath coming in shallow gasps. His eyes were wild, his body shaking uncontrollably as he struggled to maintain his composure. Outside his chamber, the palace was silent. The night watchman patrolled the halls, unaware of the terror unfolding within the prince's private room. But deep inside the castle, in the darkest corners, Namdi's torment had just begun. In the hallway, a faint sound could be heard, an echo of a soft, sorrowful cry. It was the sound of a woman mourning, and it seemed to come from every direction. It filled the halls, seeping through the walls, reaching the very heart of the palace. The guards, who had heard nothing unusual moments before, stopped in their tracks, their eyes widening in confusion. They looked at each other, unsure of what they had just heard. But no one dared to speak. They had long known that their prince was not one to be challenged, and the whisper of the spirit in the palace was not something they would dare question. They kept their distance, as the whispers grew louder, now unmistakable, now undeniable. Back inside his chamber, Namdi's desperation had reached its peak. The cold was unbearable, and the shadows in the room seemed to close in on him. The spirit of Ifeoma was everywhere, her presence suffocating, her voice relentless. Her words were no longer whispers, but cries, loud, anguished cries that tore through his mind. You will pay, Prince Namdi, you will pay for what you have done. The prince's body gave in. His legs collapsed beneath him, and he fell to the ground, his hands gripping the floor, as if it could anchor him to reality. The room spun, his vision blurred with tears. His mind was consumed with guilt and fear, and his spirit felt crushed under the weight of the torment.
Please, Ifeoma, I'm sorry. Please, I didn't mean to. Please leave me.
But the spirit was relentless. Her shadow moved closer, wrapping around him like a vice, pressing him deeper into the floor. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were demands, a cry for justice, a cry for retribution. You cannot run. You cannot hide. You will suffer until the end of your days. You will never know peace again. As Namdi's sobs filled the room, a haunting silence fell. But even in the quiet, the presence of Ifeoma's spirit remained, lingering like an unshakable weight. The prince had taken everything from her, and now her vengeance was his only future. The palace, once a place of pride and power, had become a dark and oppressive place for Prince Namdi. The whispers, the cries, the shadows, they were everywhere, following him wherever he went. There was no escape from Ifeoma's spirit. No matter how far he ran, no matter how many times he shut his eyes, the torment never stopped. It grew louder, more insistent, until it felt like his entire world was closing in on him. Prince Namdi sat on the floor of his chamber, his back pressed against the cold stone wall. His hands were shaking, his eyes wide with fear as he looked around the room. The whispers had become deafening, filling every corner, echoing in his mind. The shadowy presence of Ifeoma's spirit loomed over him, an ever-present reminder of the cruelty he had inflicted upon her. You can't escape me, Namdi. I will follow you until your last breath. You will never know peace again. Namdi's body trembled violently as he pressed his hands to his ears, trying to block out the voice. But it was no use. The voice was in his head, in his bones, in his soul. It surrounded him, suffocating him. The air in the room felt thick, oppressive, as if the very walls were closing in on him. He stood up suddenly, his heart pounding in his chest, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His body swayed unsteadily, as if he could barely keep his balance. The torment was too much. The guilt, the fear, it was all consuming.
Leave me. I've done nothing wrong. You're just a ghost, a figment of my imagination. I am the prince. I am in control.
but his words fell flat in the room. No one was there to hear him, except the relentless whispers that grew louder, more mocking. Control? You have no control, Nnamdi. You took my life, and now you will pay. Nnamdi staggered back, his hands gripping his head as if he could tear the voices out. His breath came in short, frantic bursts, and his vision blurred with tears. His chest felt tight, suffocated by the weight of his own guilt. The door to his chamber suddenly burst open, and his most trusted guard entered, looking frantic. Your Highness, what's happening? We heard you shouting, and... Before the guard could finish, Nnamdi turned to him, his eyes wide and filled with terror. He reached out with trembling hands, his voice desperate.
Get me out of here. I can't take it anymore. Please, you have to stop her. I can't think, I can't breathe. She won't stop. Please do something.
The guard stepped back in shock. He had never seen the prince like this, broken, shaking with fear. It was as if the prince had lost his mind, consumed by his own guilt and the haunting presence that tormented him. Your Highness, it's all right. We'll get you help. Will?
No, no one can help me. I deserve this. I deserve to suffer for what I've done. Please, make it stop. Make it stop.
The guard, terrified for the prince's sanity, hurriedly left the room, rushing to find anyone who could help. He knew this was beyond his ability to control. In the royal chambers, King Chijioke sat at his desk, deeply troubled by his son's behavior. He had heard the rumors about the prince's torment, the whispers of his madness. The king's heart ached for his son, but he knew that something had to be done. Nnamdi was spiraling out of control, and the kingdom could not afford to lose him to madness. The king rose from his desk, pacing the room, his mind racing with options. He had tried everything, talking, warning, advising, but nothing had worked. His son had ignored his guidance, his warnings, and now, the prince's own soul was being torn apart. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. He turned sharply to see the guard who had left Nnamdi's chamber, standing at the entrance. Your Majesty, the prince, he is not well. He is screaming, shouting, saying things. He is losing his mind. We can't control him. The king's heart sank. He had feared this moment would come, but now that it was here, he was unsure how to handle it. His son was not just defying him, he was losing himself.
Bring him to me. I must see him.
The guard nodded and quickly left the room, returning shortly with Nnamdi, who was barely able to stand. His clothes were disheveled, his eyes wild with terror. His body shook uncontrollably as the guards helped him to the king's side.
Nnamdi, my son, look at me. What is happening to you?
The prince looked up at his father, but his eyes were vacant, lost. He opened his mouth to speak, but only a strangled sob escaped.
I can't stop it. She won't leave me. The spirit, she's here, Father. She won't leave me. She's going to make me pay.
The king's face turned pale as he listened to his son's words. This was more than just madness, it was the consequence of Nnamdi's cruelty. Ifeoma's spirit had come back to claim justice, and now it was destroying his son.
We must find a way to stop this. We must find a way to calm your mind, my son. You have made a terrible mistake, but there is still time to fix it.
But Nnamdi was beyond reason now. His body was trembling violently, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. He could hear the voice again, louder this time, right behind him. You will never escape. You took my life. Now you will never find peace. Nnamdi screamed in agony, his hands clutching his head as if he could rip the voice out of his mind.
Father, please, I can't take it anymore. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I've done. Please make her stop. Please.
King Chijioke stood frozen for a moment, torn between his love for his son and the overwhelming fear that this could be the end of everything. The prince was no longer the man he had raised. He had been consumed by his own cruelty, and now the very spirit of his victim had come to exact its vengeance. The king's eyes darkened with resolve. If he couldn't reason with his son, if he couldn't make him understand the weight of his actions, then he would turn to other measures. He would not let Namdandi's soul be lost to madness.
We will find a way, Namdi. I promise you. But you must help me. You must face what you have done.
The palace had never felt so cold. The once grand halls filled with laughter and life now seemed to echo with a heavy silence. The royal guards moved about with hushed whispers, casting worried glances at one another. There was a growing unease in the air. They had seen the prince change, seen the way his mind had begun to unravel. His terror, his outbursts, his uncontrollable screams, it was clear that something was deeply wrong. But no one dared speak of it openly. Prince Namdi was still the prince. He was still the heir to the throne, despite his madness, and no one could question him. But the whispers were becoming impossible to ignore. Something had to be done. King Chijioke sat at his desk, his face etched with deep concern. He had never seen his son like this before. The boy he had raised strong, proud, and full of potential was now a shell of himself, a prisoner to his own guilt and fear. The king's heart ached for his son, but there was no time to mourn. The kingdom needed its ruler, and Namdi was slipping further and further away from that role. He stood up, his mind racing with thoughts of how to help his son. What could be done? He had tried everything, warnings, talks, even threats, but nothing had worked. The spiritual torment had taken over Namdi's mind. Ifeoma's spirit was relentless, and it seemed that her anger would not subside until she had her revenge. King Chijioke.
My son, what have you become?
His thoughts were interrupted by a loud knock at the door. The king turned quickly, his eyes narrowing with concern. The guard entered, his expression one of urgency. Guard.
Your Majesty, it's the prince. He is in his chamber again, shouting, pleading, and he's not making sense. It's getting worse. He's beyond reasoning.
The king's heart skipped a beat. He had hoped it wouldn't come to this, but now it was clear his son's mind was lost. King Chijioke.
Prepare the carriage. I will take him to the temple. We must seek the oracle.
The guard's eyes widened, but he nodded and quickly left to carry out the king's orders. King Chijioke stood by the window, looking out at the kingdom that was supposed to be passed down to his son. His mind was filled with thoughts of ancient rituals and spiritual practices that had long been forgotten. The kingdom's elders spoke of these rituals, ways to cleanse a soul consumed by darkness, but they had not been performed in generations.
Was it too late for Namdi? Could the prince still be saved?
Prince Namdi sat on the floor of his chamber, his back against the cold stone wall, his hands gripping his hair. His breathing was shallow, his eyes wide with terror. The whispers were constant, now louder, more insistent. They came from all directions, filling the room with an oppressive presence that made it hard to breathe. Her voice. You cannot run. You cannot escape me. You took my life, and now you will suffer. The prince's body trembled as the shadows seemed to shift in the room. Every corner, every wall, seemed to close in on him. His skin crawled with the sensation of being watched, of being hunted by the very spirit he had wronged. He could hear her now, not just whispering but screaming, her voice filled with rage and sorrow. The pain she had suffered, the life she had lost, it all poured into her words, seeping into his mind, twisting his thoughts. You will never find peace, Namdi. Never. You will pay for what you have done. The prince clutched his head, trying to block out the voice, but it was no use. It was inside him now, inside his mind. His vision blurred, and his heart raced with panic. He felt as though he was suffocating, as though the walls of his own mind were closing in on him. Prince Namdi.
Believe me, I am the prince. I don't deserve this. I didn't mean to. Please stop.
But the spirit did not stop. It only grew louder, more furious. And Namdi could feel his sanity slipping away. The weight of his guilt, combined with the torment of the spirit, was too much for him to bear. Outside the palace, King Chijioke arrived at the ancient temple, his heart heavy with dread. The temple was a sacred place, hidden deep in the forest. It had long been abandoned, but the king knew that there were still those who understood its rituals. It was said that the oracle could speak to the spirits and offer guidance, but those who sought the oracle's help had to be prepared for the cost. The king's hands trembled as he approached the temple, his mind filled with a growing sense of urgency. His son's life was at stake. He could not afford to fail. As he entered the temple, the air grew heavy with incense and the scent of ancient wood. The flickering torchlight cast shadows on the walls, and the sound of chanting filled the air. At the center of the temple sat the oracle, an old woman whose eyes were blind, but whose power to see the unseen was legendary. Her face was ancient, carved with the lines of many years, but there was a strength in her gaze that made the king pause. King Chijioke, kneeling before the oracle, voice trembling with desperation.
Oracle, I come to you in desperation. My son, Prince Namdi, has been consumed by his guilt. His mind is breaking under the weight of his actions. The spirit of the girl he murdered haunts him, and I fear for his sanity and for the future of the kingdom. Please help him.
The oracle's blind eyes seemed to focus on him, and she spoke in a voice that was both gentle and commanding. Oracle, the prince is lost. His soul is darkened by the life he has taken. He cannot be saved by your words, King Chijioke. Only by confronting the spirit, by facing the consequences of his actions, can his soul be cleansed. But it will not be easy. The price of redemption is great. The king's heart sank. He knew there would be a cost, but he had hoped for a different solution. King Chijioke,
Tell me what I must do. I will do anything.
Oracle, with a deep sigh. To cleanse him, to restore his mind, you must allow him to face the spirit directly. He must beg for her forgiveness not as a prince, but as a man. He must confront the pain he has caused, the lives he has destroyed. Only then will the spirit release him. But know this, his soul will never be the same. If he is not ready to face the truth, then he will lose himself completely. The king nodded, though his heart was heavy with the weight of what was to come. His son would have to face his guilt and the spirit of Ifeoma in order to find redemption. But would Namdi be strong enough to face the consequences of his actions? Or would he be consumed by his own madness? The palace was quiet. The once grand and bustling halls were now filled with a sense of dread and unease. The news of Prince Namdi's torment had spread throughout the kingdom, and there was an air of uncertainty. The people whispered of his madness, of the vengeful spirit that had come to claim him, but none dared to speak it openly, for fear that the prince might hear of their murmurs. King Chijioke, his heart heavy with sorrow, had taken one final step. He had brought Namdi to the temple as instructed by the oracle. The king had hoped for a miracle, a solution, anything to save his son. But deep down he knew that the path to redemption was not one that his son could walk. The prince's mind had already been broken, his guilt had consumed him, and now his soul was lost. There was no turning back. Ifeoma's spirit had tortured him relentlessly, dragging him through the deepest pits of his own conscience, and now she would have her final vengeance. The air inside the temple was thick with incense, and the chanting of the priest reverberated through the sacred walls. The king and his son stood in the center of the temple, the cold stone floor beneath their feet. Namdi's body trembled as the spirit of Ifeoma's presence grew stronger, her voice echoing in his ears, filling his soul with anguish.
Please make it stop. I can't take it anymore. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did.
The king stood beside him, his face lined with sadness. His son, the once proud and powerful prince, was now a shell of the man he had been. Namdi's face was pale, his eyes wild with terror, as if the very presence of Ifeoma's spirit was suffocating him. His breath came in short gasps, his body shaking uncontrollably. King Chijioke.
Namdi, please, son, listen to me. You can still save yourself. You must face her. You must beg for her forgiveness.
But Namdi could no longer hear his father. He had already given up on any hope of redemption. The voice of Ifeoma had been his constant companion, his torturer, his judge. It had driven him mad, and now it was the only thing that filled his world. Voice of Ifeoma. You will never escape me, Namdi. You took my life, and now you will pay for it. Your soul will be mine. The prince dropped to his knees, his body racked with sobs, his hands clutching the floor. His mind was a whirlwind of guilt and regret, his soul drowning in the torment he had brought upon himself. The shadow of Ifeoma loomed over him, and he could feel her presence pressing against him, suffocating him. Prince Namdi.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. Please forgive me. I beg you.
But the spirit of Ifeoma did not respond. There was only silence, an oppressive, suffocating silence that filled the room. The shadows grew darker, and Namdi felt as if the very air around him was crushing him. He could feel his heart racing, his breathing shallow, as if the weight of his guilt and fear were too much for his body to bear. The king watched helplessly, his heart breaking as he saw his son deteriorate before him. Namdi's body convulsed, his hands clutching at his chest, as if something inside him was breaking apart. His eyes were wide with terror, and his mouth opened in a silent scream. Prince Namdi. I
can't, please, I'm sorry, I can't breathe.
The king rushed forward, his hands shaking as he tried to steady his son, but it was too late. Namdi's body went limp in his arms, his eyes wide, staring at nothing. A faint breath escaped his lips, and then nothing. The prince was gone. King Chijioke collapsed beside him, his heart shattered. His son, the boy he had raised, the boy he had loved, was lost to him. The prince's final moments were filled with terror and regret, and the weight of his actions had finally claimed him. The king closed his eyes, his grief overwhelming him. He had lost his son, but more than that, he had lost the hope that the prince could be redeemed. Namdi had been consumed by his own darkness, and there was nothing left to save him. The first rays of sunlight broke through the trees, casting a soft golden light over the temple. The kingdom was waking up, unaware of the tragedy that had just unfolded within its walls. The guards, the priests, and the villagers went about their day, oblivious to the loss that had just occurred. But in the temple, King Chijioke remained on his knees beside his son's lifeless body, the weight of his grief a silent burden he would carry for the rest of his life. In the days that followed, the kingdom of UCHE mourned the loss of their prince. The whispers of his madness, his cruelty, and the vengeful spirit that had claimed him spread far and wide. The people of the kingdom knew the truth. Prince Namdi had been a man of great potential, but his arrogance and cruelty had led him down a dark path. He had taken everything from the people around him, and in the end it was his own soul that paid the price. King Chijioke, heartbroken and devastated, ruled alone, but the kingdom would never be the same. The memory of the prince's fall from grace and the haunting presence of Ifeoma's spirit would linger in the land for generations to come.